Step forward with me. We're going into a different space. We're going to put one foot in front of the other. Moving through life. Onto the edge of the unknown. Your whole experience sits behind you. A mountain of knowledge. Your strength. Your achievements. And all your learning. And in front of you lies what? Maybe you think you know. But in truth, do we ever really know? So let's be here for a while, on the edge of the unknown, in the space between the past and the future. Fully present, fully alive, in this moment. Free of all your knowledge, and yet strengthened by it. Unconstrained by all your plans. And yet facing forward into the unknown. Step by step. Walking into your life as life moves through you. This is the wild place. The place where you're raw. Open. This is the place of playful creativity. It's the place of delight and surprise. This is the place of your innocence. Where you find yourself revealed for who you really are. We are on the edge of the unknown. We are in the pure wilderness of our inner life. We are alive. So let's put one foot in front of the other as we walk forward on the edge of the unknown.
Can you feel the pace of consciousness as it comes through that recording, and how the pace of human consciousness, real consciousness, matches precisely the pace of nature, of the waves moving across the screen, moving across the ocean in the way that they do forever. And when we match that pace, it feels like we slow down because something inside us needs to slow down. But when we really tap into consciousness, then other things speed up. So I'm going to talk today at the invitation, as with so many others, from Terry, about the consciousness of money. And a few months ago, he called me and said, "Sarah, I want you to talk about 3D and 5D. That's not normally my language. I don't use those words 3D and 5D, so I've been on a little research mission to find out how people talk about 3D and 5D. And I've decided to come back to my own experience and share with you something about this 3D and 5D, three-dimensional and five-dimensional living, and how we can use that in the sphere of money and our consciousness as human beings to influence the material world. So I figured that with this kind of title, it would be useful to start with a few definitions, because I know there are some people in this room who I've met who probably talk about consciousness quite often, and there are probably others who never sit around in conversations talking about consciousness. So let's figure out a little bit what that is. It's actually quite a difficult thing to answer. I had a good friend for a while who was a physicist and had been a physicist all his life and had been a member of the Transcendental Meditation Organization for his whole life. He trained with Maharishi, so with the guru of Transcendental Meditation, and his entire life's work was to try to figure out what consciousness was. And there are many other people, I think, who've been on that kind of life's journey, so it feels a bit cheeky in a way to put my own definition in. But I need to have a working definition of it, because consciousness is actually very, very important to everything that every single person in this conference has been talking about so far. So I went back to the really basic start, and I thought about, well, sometimes we say that people are unconscious, and then we say that they're conscious. And usually more metaphysical people will avoid thinking about things like that. I don't know why. They always want to go out into the kind of nether reaches of deep thinking. But I thought, well, let's just start there and see what's the difference between somebody who's unconscious, whether they're drunk or in a coma or whatever it is, and somebody who's conscious. And the big difference is the person who is conscious can make decisions. But in today's world, we talk about consciousness, we talk about conscious business. I would say I run a conscious business. We talk about consciousness in health and farming and all these different things. So it's not just a question of I can make decisions and you're lying in a hospital bed and you can't make decisions. We've added layers to the meaning of consciousness. So I started to think about it a bit more, and I figured out that the key about consciousness, whether it's in a human being, just in a human form, or maybe we're talking about consciousness, like big consciousness. The key is that there is some form, there is some system, or there is some entity there. So let's just stay with human beings for now. There's a human being, and that human being has access to a whole lot of information through their awareness. So you can be aware of things, but not really do anything about it, not make any decisions about it. So that's the difference between consciousness and awareness. Awareness is all this stuff you have access to. And what's really fascinating these days is we don't just need to rely on what we could call the more scientific or physical awareness. That's one part of it. So we can go out into the world and observe things that are happening, and we can use our senses and our knowledge to increase our awareness. We can read books, as John Kempf was talking about. There are many ways that we can expand our awareness, and we have an extraordinary range of opportunities for that. When I was at school, everybody in the school read the great books, and that's all we ever really read, and that was this kind of small collection of British books from history. If you think about that nowadays, it just doesn't even make sense. We have so much knowledge available to us. But at the same time, we have a lot of intuitive knowledge or information also available to us. We are more and more aware these days of our subtle sensory systems. I had a conversation last night at dinner with somebody who was talking about energy. We talk about energy a lot. 20 years ago, I started a business in London called the Energy Bank. You couldn't really talk about energy in those days, except that we did. And it was a place for bankers to come and fill themselves up with energy so they would feel good all day and be able to work well. So a lot has changed in that last 20 years. And now it is really common to find people in business, in health and healing, in many realms of our life, tapping into their intuition, tapping into their subtle senses. I work with many highly sensitive people, and I would be willing to bet that a large part of this audience would come under that category of being highly sensitive, and you have or you receive information at a subtle level that enriches your awareness. And so we can go to many different sources. As you get better at it, you find yourself able to listen to plants and animals. That's using those subtle senses, because they don't just talk in our physical senses. And I'm sure that Dai is doing that. We can connect with sages. Napoleon Hill talked about having a mastermind group. I met somebody the other day who connects with Tesla, I think. He's probably here now. Nikola Tesla, Einstein, so like dead people, basically, but really, really clever dead people. We can connect with, better to connect with good. If you're going to go that way, do it with the good ones, okay? And use their advice wisely. Listen to what Buddha said. I teach people to connect with their higher self. It's just like that better part of you that makes better decisions and is not locked into the little drama of your life because something has just happened on the farm or in your business or wherever it is, but can actually get to a place of peace and clarity and even some kind of enjoyment of the situation so that you make much better decisions that way. So there are many different ways. Traditionally, people have connected with God and received information, and some of that has gone good ways and some of it has gone some fairly challenging ways, I would say. So I think we always need to be very, very careful about what we connect with and how we source information. But our awareness is an incredible, incredible faculty that we have access to. And tuning it and honing it and growing your skill for awareness, a broader, more expanded awareness, will be a great gift when we come to consciousness. So we have all this information you can access. Then we have the human being who sits in the middle of this and lives in this very 3D world. We'll talk a bit more about 3D, very physical and often quite limited. We have this body that doesn't always do exactly what we want it to do, and it doesn't look like we want it to look. And we live on farms and land, and it doesn't always behave the way we want it to. And so there's this physical, this feeling of physical. We can be aware of so many things, and yet what am I capable of right now feels so much smaller. And we have to live with this contradiction all the time. But that, to me, is the beauty of being a conscious human being. Because what you can do is you can source from your awareness, whether you go and ask your friends, or go and ask the bank manager, or your accountant, or whatever, or go and ask your higher self, or go and talk to angels, or go and consult with Nikola Tesla. It doesn't really matter, but you have a whole lot of ways that you can get some information that you can feed into your system, into your consciousness. And from that information, you can select what's relevant. You articulate with your mind something that feels really potent for you, and you turn that into your material reality. Let's make that really basic. I can get a whole lot of information about a step that I want to make in my business. I then kind of crunch it and dream about it and think about it and talk about it and process it. And at a certain point, it becomes a decision. I actually say, that's what I'm doing. And from that moment, that business starts to change. We take totally different activities from what we did before. Now, we all do this every day because we're conscious human beings. But how well do we do it? What sources of information are we using? What are we aware of? How conscious are we in the decisions we make? Because when we just follow the crowd, we're not being conscious. We go with the speed rather than slowing down to the speed of consciousness, which I did when I made that recording, because that was an improvisation. There wasn't written or planned or anything. It just literally, it's like in that moment, you get to the speed of consciousness and speak from that place. Music being improvised at the same time. And then there's a pace, there's a natural flow of information that emerges, which has a completely different quality to it from our normal, rushed, very mental decision-making process. In that situation, I'm just not even deciding, just allowing the words to flow, but there's a decision that happened at the beginning to be in a state where that is possible. And for me, if we can bring that kind of state to the decisions we make in our businesses and on our farms and in our family life, in our relationships, we live a very, very different quality of life. So that's a little bit about consciousness. So my short definition is it's the ability of a being or an entity or a system to make decisions that are sourced in awareness and change reality, our physical reality. Okay, so let's come to money. Money, probably in the title, was the one thing that feels pretty familiar. But I would like to suggest that we don't know nearly as much about money as we could. So I had an experience in December 2010. I had a business failure. It was the end of what started as the energy bank. It had been through a lot of changes and management changes. I was brought in basically to more or less help it to die, as it turned out. I'd started it and I killed it. It was a very horrible experience, made much worse. I had trained by then for, I think, 20 years with 2 Chinese masters. And it's from then that I learned to talk about energy. I think about energy all the time because I spent so much time in that world. I had a Chinese master who was on my back every single day because we were supposed to be able to achieve the impossible. So we were supposed to make this business flourish in the middle of a horrendous recession where we lost 90% of our business overnight. And we just couldn't. We failed miserably. Anyhow, about 3 weeks after that, I was sitting on my bed, the first time in probably 10 years that I'd had nothing to do. And I'd been given this little book, tiny little book called How to Be a Money Magnet. And it had a question in it. And the question simply said, what would money like to say to you? And I started writing notes, not really thinking that money would like to say anything to me, because I didn't actually think that money said things. And I really wasn't very interested in money, although I'd been running a business, and maybe that's part of the reason why we failed. I was very idealistic, driven by all the knowledge that we wanted to share and the education, and not terribly good at the money side. But anyway, it turned out that money had actually quite a lot to say to me, and I came to realize after a while that it was not only for me, but it was also for you. So that first day I sat and I scribbled in my little notebook the very first message that I ever received from money. And I think that that would be something that is really worth your while hearing. So I'm going to play you a video, and I just want you to imagine that this thing called money, we use it and think about it all the time, is speaking to you. However far-fetched that might seem, that's my kind of awareness works that way. I can talk to crazy things like money, but it speaks with this incredible consciousness and power and voice.
This is what money would like to say to you. I would like to tell you to love me. Smile at me. Collect me. Enjoy me. Feel my power. Spend me. Invest me. Give me. Pay with me. Take me. I am an energy. I'm very powerful and beautiful. I'm an incredible web of connections. I am light. You're too afraid of me, as you are of many things. You can open up and embrace me fully into your life. It's not too late. You can start now. Just open yourself and say yes. Be brave. Love me. Love yourself so you can accept my power, my glory, my light, my beauty. I'm not the devil. I never have been. I'm a glorious being of light. I connect human beings with each other. I'm so flexible. You can use me to channel your creativity. Just go ahead. I'm waiting for you. You must open your heart. You're too rigid, too afraid, and there's nothing to be afraid of. You will win not only me, but life also. I'm always here to help you. Just accept me, and I'll come to you very quickly. You've chosen to have more. There's a lot of me waiting for you. Don't wait, just take me. I will love you.
So you can probably imagine that that was a bit of a surprise. I had never, ever in my life had any conception that I could think about or feel about or approach money in that way. And what then happened was I thought, that was a really nice experience, because it opened my heart, it touched me in a way that I think I'd never been touched before. And it was using words that were not my words. So I knew it was real somehow. I knew that this was not something that had come from my mind. I knew I could never have written something like that. And I could feel this very deep truth in it from the moment that I wrote it, even though it is so very totally and utterly different from how we usually think about money. And so I thought, well, I'll have another go. And luckily, Money showed up the next day and had another message from me. And then every day after that, for about 3 months, it just said, hey, Money, have you got anything to say to me today? And I ended up with the book that Anthony mentioned called Love Money, Money Loves You, which is just the pure, raw messages from money to us about what it is really, how it works really, and how we can relate with it and use it in a way that gives us freedom, that brings us enjoyment, that is not about sacrificing our family life or our health and well-being, all the things that we tend to sacrifice, especially when we're in business, but actually about living a life I came to recognize that is aligned with who you are. And really, to me, more than anything, it's actually about how do you live a really rich life. Rich on the inside, rich on the outside, but it's a life that fits you. And your rich life might be very simple. Somebody else's rich life might be very what we typically think of as wealth. Might have a lot of resources flowing through it. You might have a lot of one type of resource flowing through. Somebody else might have a lot of another kind of resource flowing through. There are so many resources. And I came to understand this energy of money as really being the energy of manifestation, materialization, and ultimately creation. So this taps very much into what Zach was talking about, what he started the day with. And so it's an energy that we can call on and literally ask to help us. And my early days of learning, because I was completely broke when I wrote the book, literally. When I finished it, I had $200, and I had to spend $99 to get a program to format it in Word, because I couldn't afford to get anybody to do anything for me. I had a terrible photo. I had to put it in a fake name because my teacher wouldn't let me publish it. And I knew it had to be published. I called myself Joy Prospero, kind of launched it into the world. And I didn't tell anybody about it. So I put it on Amazon and left it there, and I didn't tell anybody for 9 months that I'd published it. That's where it started from. I had so much fear and worry and shame and all that kind of stuff around it, lots of difficult emotions. But about 9 months later, I made a new version of it for 5 people, and I put a little introduction, a personal introduction at the front, and published it. And somebody must have talked to somebody, because very slowly, sometimes 1 book a month would sell. Sometimes somebody would give 5 books to a friend, and then nothing would happen for a few months. And that's really how it all started. So I had no clue. Even after writing the book, I had no clue. But I had it's not a blueprint, it's more like an energy print. It's an invitation to behave in a different way that will lead you to have a radically and deeply different relationship with money that is based in love, abundance, generosity, and the deep principles of nature. And therefore, in terms of regenerative farming and all the work that you're doing here, it is so aligned with every single example that we hear from this stage that I feel like this book was written for this movement. It's the money piece. And money is really important because we usually think fairly casually that money is the root of all evil. We can look around the world and see that money really does appear to be the cause of pretty much everything that's wrong with it. But what I came to understand is that it's not money that's wrong, it's us. It's what we do with it. And I came to understand money is not neutral, like people will often say. It is genuinely an energy of love. That's what people discover when they develop a relationship with money. And it works like any love relationship. And when you're frosty or ignore it or constantly angry about it or very confused, you don't have a very good relationship. But when you are warm and approachable and willing to say when you've made a mistake and be honest with yourself and honest with your partner, money, it actually works much better for you. It doesn't work very well in the old way. It's not really something you can force and manipulate and use in abusive ways. Obviously, it's possible to do that. People make a lot of money doing that. But I think what the book was saying is that there is a change coming, and that the way of manifesting of the future is based on the change you would like to see happen in society and the contribution that you make to that as a human being. And that's really what I'm seeing. I'm beginning to really feel that happen now. After 10 years of learning how to do it, and the usual struggle of being a pioneer in a sphere that is so difficult to talk about in any way other than a traditional way, I'm beginning to really feel the shift happening. I think a lot of the hard yards have been done. So let's just have a little bit of a think here about 3D and 5D and how this relates to money. So 3D is the world that we're used to. It's the world of, first of all, in dimensional terms, it's the width, height, and depth. So, I'm not good on all that stuff, but basically that's kind of what, if you look it up on Google, it comes out like that, width, height, and depth. It's just not 2D, obviously not like a flat piece of paper. But I think of it more as the world of our five senses, our physical senses. And so that's the way that we typically think of ourselves interacting with the world that we live in. In fact, I think it's quite a limited definition, but at least it's useful to be able to relate to that. Because if you think about what I talked about, awareness, some of that awareness stuff is not really in the five sensory world. We're using different senses. And I work with an incredible energy master who says we have literally, it's like we have 1,000 different senses. And we often use a tiny, tiny fraction of those, because every time we get hurt, every time we get traumatized, we shut our senses down. And then we end up with a limited number of senses. And it's like we're trying to smell with our ears, or eat with our feet or something. It's just like, it's all the wrong way around, because we don't have our full range of subtle senses in action, activated. But for now, let's think of 3D as the physical reality that we all know and recognize, where we run our businesses, we run our farms, and we do all our daily activities. And then we go to 5D. The physicists have a description. They started to figure out that maybe there was a fifth dimension. The fourth dimension was described as time or space-time. And then they figured out there was a fifth dimension, but all the explanations I read, I couldn't understand. So it kind of like, okay, that doesn't really work very well for me. So I looked in more of the spiritual books. I started looking at some books where people talk about 5D and YouTube films and things like that. And every single one of them had their own personal definition. It's like, oh, that's not very helpful either. But what I can see and what I can relate to through personal experience is that there is a notion of a world of all possibilities, which is not just imagination. It's kind of like a space that we can access with those subtle senses that gives us an awareness, a direct awareness of possibilities that are not necessarily present in the 3D world. And so sometimes when we have a vision, it's not always just an imagination of what we want. There's something more to it in that. When you feel called to do something in your life, in your business, whatever it is, there's something guiding you, there's something leading you towards some purpose or some mission or something that needs to be done in the world. It seems like we're connecting with something beyond the information we can source here and beyond our imagination. It's very important to realize our imagination is mostly fed by what we know. In 5D, you can access information that you don't know. And as you get better at doing it, you realize that it's the most incredible source of possibility and potentiality and power. Because all those of you here who've been called by some vision, and I know that there are many of you, will know that once that kind of clicks in, there's a power that comes to you to do that thing that other people don't have, because they just don't have that alignment. And when you find your alignment, like your piece of life, whatever it is that's really yours to do and you feel called to in some way, and it might be helping somebody else, it doesn't have to be a vision. You might be just the person who can make somebody else's vision work, and everyone has a different role in here. But when you have that, there's a power that comes to you that enables you to make better decisions and enables you to find a track, to carve a path through this incredibly treacherous terrain, in a way, that we're walking through, as Zach pointed out this morning, and to build a kind of protection around what you're doing. And that is extremely, extremely important in today's world. When you can build that kind of protection around your work, and you have a North Star, you have a guidance system inside you that enables you to stay on track and know which decisions made through accessing awareness will affect reality in the way you want them to, then you are operating in a different way from the way that we were educated to operate, which was largely jumping through hoops and pleasing other people and doing things that weren't necessarily relevant even to who you are. So if we bring that back to the consciousness of money, when we talk about money, when I think about money, it's an unbelievable enabler. When I pay somebody, I feel like I'm giving them some freedom. I've purchased something from them, but I've given them freedom to do what they want with it. So I don't see it anymore like I used to. It's like, oh, something's going away from me. They've got more and I've got less. Because that's actually not really true about money. Money works on very different principles from that. But actually what I do is I give people a little piece of freedom. They can do what they want with it. They can buy what they want. I don't have to barter. None of those unbelievably complicated systems that are always presented as the solution. I can actually just pass some freedom on to another person. They can pass it on to another person. They can pass it on to another person. That little $100 note that I started with is suddenly providing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and then thousands, tens of thousands of dollars worth of value through our society, through our community, which is a very remarkable thing if you think about it. So for me, the key in our relationship with money is, first of all, to understand what it is, to actually learn more about what it is really, not just what you thought it was or what your parents told you or just what your experience has shown you. And then to exercise your consciousness, slow down your decision making, source information from all the types of awareness that you can, make wise decisions that will last, hopefully, for generations. Can you imagine that if you run your business that way, if your business is run on the principles of love, even for the people who are really annoying, the bad customers and the suppliers who didn't, or the people who don't pay on time, all of that stuff, but actually you bring love to that relationship and you genuinely operate in an environment of abundance. And there is a sense in you of generosity with everybody who you interact with through your business. And it aligns with nature, so it aligns with you, with who you are, not who you think you're supposed to be or who your parents said, but actually who you are as a piece of this natural ecosystem that we live in and participate in. We're just another piece of nature. And when you align with your nature and you make financial decisions and resource decisions and manifestation and materialization decisions, from that place, your business, your family, your farm will be different. And it's up to you to imagine what the difference is. So let's go into a little bit of 5D space, shall we? It's probably easier to do this with your eyes closed, but you don't need to. Whatever feels right for you. And instead of just imagining or going into a visioning, we're not visioning it here, we're going to very gently allow ourselves to quieten down, like quieten down your mind. There's been a lot of words, and let those words become a bit unimportant at the moment. And find a place inside yourself that is you, just you, simple, ordinary you. Don't need to be special. Don't need to prove anything. You don't even need to be able to do this. It really doesn't matter. And be aware of your business, or your farm, or your project, or your contribution. What's currently important for you. And simply open yourself to receive some kind of information or energy or subtle feeling or image or deep knowing, something that would be profoundly valuable for you in your work. You can't force this, so don't put any pressure on yourself. If you don't get it now, it'll come later. There is a stream of energy, which is subtle information, which is the coding of life, which is what makes life happen. It is flowing through you, as it always does. And in this open space, you may notice things that you don't when you're more busy. If there's any problem that you're wrestling with in your work or your life, open up for a solution. Not something you know already, for the peace you don't know. If there's something beautiful you want to create, open up for some information, some happening that will help you. If there's some money that you really need at the moment to be able to take the next step, open up and allow the energy of that money to arrive in your being. The instructions that will bring that money to you, the coding of life. And let's very gently allow whatever is here, and it may just be a feeling of peace, a little feeling of perhaps a little enjoyment, a little relaxation. That might be all it is for now. Whatever you're experiencing, allow that to melt through your whole system, not to stay in your head, but to melt through your body, through your energy, through the whole of your being. It's as if it's going to go all the way down into the ground. It's going to become so grounded, so 3D, that it can become reality. May take a little time, but that doesn't matter. Everything takes time. If you feel your feet on the ground, you might be able to feel even pressure or this sense like, this is coming down, down, down through me. Or it's going, flowing all the way through me. The whole of me is engaged in this, not just my head, not just my body. And as you connect from the 5D world into the 3D world, there is a relaxation. There's a potential for genuine, simple enjoyment. There's a sense of self. This is me. This is who I am. I don't need to be anything special. I'm just me. I'm in the right place, I'm the right person, I'm doing the right thing, and it's just my thing. It's very simple. And as you allow your whole being, your whole system, there's so much to it, there's so much more than what we normally talk about. As you allow all of that to be engaged in this subtle sourcing of information into the 3D world, you will see that you start to be able to make more conscious, wiser decisions with access to more information, more energy, more manifestation, more materialization. And therefore, your creativity is hugely expanded through this very, very simple experience. Okay, and let's just let all of that be as grounded as you can wherever you are now. Just bring yourself back to normal waking consciousness. And let's put this in a little bit of a context of where we are now. A friend of mine who's called Jyoti Ma, 20 years ago she was given a vision of sacred economy. She had no idea what that meant. She's a very remarkable woman. She brought together the 13, what's it called? I forgot. The 13 grandmothers, that's right. The 13 grandmothers who are 13 indigenous elders from tribes all over the world. And I think a film was made about them. And she works for original peoples on every continent, spends a lot of her time traveling from one to the other. She's 75 years old. And a few weeks ago, she traveled to Colombia, and she was invited to meet a group of the Kogi people. And it was the first time that they had ever come in contact with a Westerner. There was a little delegation that went there. And this particular group, they normally live right up in the top of the mountains. And some years ago, some of them came down from the mountains and started to connect with other indigenous groups. And now they started to connect with the West. They see themselves as the big brother of the planet. And they see the rest of us basically as the little brother. And they had been told that the little brother was in trouble. And they gave her a message, and she gave this message to me, and I feel that it's my job to pass this message on to other people. They said, it is time, you are ready, don't wait, take action. There are big changes on the way, but the big message was, whatever it is that you need to do, whatever it is that you're drawn or called to do, now is the time to do it. And I'd like to finish with a very short film which I recorded, and to me this one holds the instructions that we can follow in order to create the change that Zach was talking about. And rather beautifully, it's actually called Toward 2030. So I see this as kind of heralding the next conference, it's 8 years now because we're 2 years late with this conference for RCS. So this could be a pathway for us, the subtle instructions for how do we create this change in the world so that the world lives on regenerative principles.
Let's take a look into the year 2030. A time when we can see the results of so many people making positive change. Let's feel right now what it's like to know peace on our planet. Let's see what it looks like when Earth is free to restore her natural beauty. Let's listen to the sounds of people who are living in harmony with each other and with nature. Let's sense the deep love for life that has created this change. The people who have joined together to do good for the world. The individuals who had the courage and determination to do what they knew was right. The organizations that change direction for the sake of our mutual well-being. The leaders who encouraged us to trust ourselves and our inner knowing. The spirits who whispered in our hearts, showing us the way when we couldn't see it clearly. These are the expressions of love that unite us and give us power to move forward, creating the world we long to live in. Let's bring that world into the present moment and live it today and tomorrow and the next day and every day on the path to 2030 and beyond.
Create a relationship with money that is based on love, abundance, generosity, and the principles of nature that is aligned with who you are. And this is really a very simple way of doing the being. Thank you very much.